Good morning and welcome back to Crochet Every Day with Judy. Today we are reading from Robin Hood, beginning with part 2 of chapter 1. So we will continue. The next morning, the band of outlaws carried out the trial of shooting without delay. In a sunny glade, they set up such a mark as they were used to shoot at, and called upon Robin Hood to show his skill by putting a shaft in the center of it. But Robin shook his head. "'Tis no test at all," he cried. "Anyone could hit that mark, and then several would succeed. Nay, nay, set up a mark, I say, which will end the matter once and for all." "Set it up yourself, Robin Hood," cried John Ford, who had hitherto been looked upon as the best shot in the band and hoped to win the leadership. "That I will," replied Robin Hood, "if it is agreed that I may do so." "Aye, aye," cried the outlaws. "Set up the mark, Robin Hood." So Robin took sprays of leaves and clusters of wildflowers and wove a little garland or wreath. Then he bade Will Stutely take the garland and hang it from the bough of an oak at the far end of the glade. "Now," said Robin, "I say that he is worthy of the name of an archer who can send his shaft through the ring of yonder garland, yet touch neither leaf nor flower." The outlaws looked at each other in wonder. "Who could see such a mark?" cried one man. "It would need the eye of an eagle to take aim." "Aye, and the strength of a horse to bend a bow to send a shaft to such a distance," cried another. "I am out of it at once," shouted a third. "My bow will not reach so far." In the end, only John Ford was willing to try his chance at the garland, and he fitted a new string to his bow and chose the straightest, truest shafts from his quiver. The two competitors drew lots for the order in which they were to shoot, and John Ford had to shoot first. Each man was to loose 3 shafts at the tiny mark. Ford loosed the first shaft, but it fell a good 10 yards short. He gave a grunt of vexation and drew his string farther back and shot higher, but still he fell short. A third time, and his arrow dropped under the garland. "I have gone as near to it as I may," he cried. "'Tis the most puzzling mark I ever tried at. No mortal man, I believe, will ever compass it." "Shoot, shoot, Robin Hood," cried Much. "I saw thee loose 4 shafts in wondrous fashion yesterday, but this is another kind of mark to a man's body," and the miller's son shook his head, as if in doubt that his champion had set up too severe a test. Now Robin Hood stood forth, and the outlaws watched him in utter silence as he raised the great bow, laid his body into it, and drew the string taut. The shaft hummed through the air, and a shout of surprise burst from every lip as it was seen to dart through the very center of the garland and stick quivering in the trunk of the oak. But the voice of John Ford rose above all. "Let him do it again! Let him do it again!" cried the tall outlaw. "It may have been a happy chance. Let him loose his 3 shafts." "Willingly," said Robin, and bent his bow, and sent a second shaft whistling through the garland, and then a third, nor did any one of the 3 touch leaf or flower. The flight of the third shaft was followed by a great shout of applause from the lookers-on. Every man there was an archer of more than common skill, so that all could appreciate this wonderful shooting, though none could hope to rival it. "Robin Hood forever!" they shouted. "Never was such archery seen before in merry Sherwood." "Now," cried Much, "what say ye, comrades? Is not this prince of bowmen worthy to be our leader and captain?" He is," they cried. "We will live and die under Robin Hood." The outlaws swore to be faithful and true to their young leader, and the first of them to take the oath were Much the miller's son and Wat, the 2 men he had saved from the foresters. Next came John Ford, who had been wholly won over by Robin's wonderful skill with the bow, and then Will Stutely, his companion in the flight to the forest, and lastly the remainder of the band. "Listen to me, my comrades," cried Robin, when all had given their fealty. "These be the laws that all in our band must follow. First, we will wage war on all the Norman tyrants who are enriching themselves with spoils torn from the rightful owners of the soil, our Saxon brethren. Second, we will offer no violence to any poor or needy man, but aid him with the wealth we may gain from Norman sheriff or baron or churchman. Third, that no woman, rich or poor, Norman or Saxon, shall have aught to fear from us. These be the laws of our fellowship." And the outlaws agreed to obey Robin's orders in every particular. They were still gathered around the garland talking of the wonderful feat which had been performed when a small bent man came shuffling through the trees. "Who is this coming?" cried Will Stutely, who was the first to see him. "A friend," replied Much. "He is one Lobb, a cobbler of Nottingham. He watches for us in the town and is a sworn gossip of some of the sheriff's men. From them he learns what the sheriff thinks of doing against us, and then warns us that we may secure our safety. How now, Lobb?" he cried as the little man came up. What news bring ye?" "Look out for yourselves, say I," replied Lob. "The sheriff is drawing together a strong force of foresters to march upon ye. He is in a terrible rage, for the chief forester and others have been slain in a fray yesterday, and he swears that he will have the heads of 3 outlaws for every man he hath lost. But most angry is he against some stranger of whom I have never heard before. There be notices set up in the marketplace offering a great reward for one Robert Fitzooth, also known as Robin Hood. Whoever shall bring him in as prisoner, or his head shall receive 300 silver pennies." "A great reward indeed," cried Much. "So you may see what value the sheriff puts upon you, master." He spoke to Robin Hood, and the latter nodded but made no reply. How strange it seemed to Robin that Lob had seen a notice offering a reward for his life. It made him feel the reality of his outlawry. Then Much raised his bow and shouted, "Ho for the merry greenwood! Ho for our brave leader Robin Hood, Prince of Bowmen, and now in very deed Prince of Outlaws!" And the rest of the band joined in the cheer. Robin's eye flashed and his face brightened. He might be an outlaw, but with the vast forest open to him and a band of stout fellows to be his support, he feared no Norman sheriff in the land. Chapter 2. Robin Hood Meets Little John. The news that Lob had brought from Nottingham proved to be quite true. The sheriff sent a great band of well-armed men against the outlaws, a band so strong that the outlaws had to leave Sherwood for a time and seek refuge in another great woodland, that of Barnesdale in Yorkshire. But they loved their haunts in merry Sherwood above all other places, and returned as soon as they discovered that the angry sheriff had given up the chase. Now, Robin Hood saw that his band was not strong enough to hold its own with the Norman Rangers, and he looked about for stout men who would be a gain to his fellowship. Many men, driven to despair by harsh and cruel lords, wished to join him, but he took none but such as were proved to be bold, staunch, and trusty. If he heard of any man who was strong and clever beyond his fellows, he did his utmost to draw that man to him, and he very rarely failed, so that little by little he gathered a powerful band of splendid archers about him, all picked men of whom it was said that one of Robin Hood's men was worth 4 common bowmen. Now it happened one day that Robin Hood went roving through the greenwood, and a number of his men went with him. They came to the border of the forest and looked out across the open country. "Stay among the trees, my men," said Robin. "It would draw attention if a company should be seen marching across the fields. But I will go forward alone to see if any adventure may promise for us. Perchance some rich knight or abbot may be on the road this fine morning, and we will lighten his swollen purse of its load. If I need ye, I will sound my bugle horn." So Much and Will Stutely and Wat and the rest stayed in hiding in the forest, and Robin went on alone. He walked down to the high road, but it seemed empty, and he strolled along it. Presently he came to a place where a brook ran across the road. Horses went through a ford, but foot passengers could cross by a long, narrow wooden bridge without a handrail. Robin stepped on the bridge to walk across, and at the very instant that he did so, a huge fellow, a very giant of a man, stepped on the farther end. Each moved forward briskly, thinking that the other would give way, and they met in the middle of the bridge. "By Our Lady," thought Robin Hood to himself, "this is a noble yeoman. Would that I could win him over to my side. I will see if he has mettle to match his size." In truth, such a man as the stranger was not often met with. He was head and shoulders taller than Robin, of immense breadth of shoulder and depth of chest, long-armed and long-legged, and appeared strong as a bull. He had a pleasant face and a bright brown eye, but there was a quiet resolution in his bearing which hinted that he would be a very awkward person to cross. Robin made test of him at once. "Give way, my man," he cried. "What meant ye by stepping on the bridge when you saw that I was about to come over, and that the bridge is not wide enough for 2? The stranger carried, besides his sword, a huge quarterstaff, full 7 feet long, thick and heavy, a tremendous cudgel. He now quietly leaned upon it and smiled as he said, "And why should I stand aside for you, archer? Let me tell you that I have never stood aside for any man yet, and see no reason to begin this day." "What!" cried Robin, "you bandy words with me, do you? I'll show you some right Nottingham play, my fine fellow, big as you are." And with that, Robin Hood slipped an arrow in the string of his bow and drew it to his ear. "Now," went on Robin, "back with you, I say. Your life is in my hands. I could send this shaft through your heart before you could lift your staff to fetch a single blow at me." Robin did this to see if the stranger would show fear, but the tall man listened as calmly as if Robin had been giving him good day. "A coward's trick, that would be," replied the stranger. "Here stand I with but a staff in my hand, and you threaten me with a long bow and grey goose shaft. A coward's trick, I say. Nay, quoth Robin, I will gladly meet thee on thy own terms. So Robin laid aside his great bow of Spanish yew and his quiver of sharp-pointed arrows, and ran to a thicket beside the stream and cut himself a stout staff of ground oak. When he came back with his stick, the stranger was still resting on his quarterstaff in the middle of the bridge. Here will we fight where we have met, cried Robin Hood, and the man who knocks the other into the stream shall be the winner. Agreed, cried the gigantic stranger, and the two combatants faced each other warily, setting their feet cautiously on the narrow planking and grasping their staves about midway of the length in order to be ready for assault or defense. For a few moments, the two champions whirled their sticks about, feinting, striking, parrying, each searching for an opening in the other's guard. Robin was the first to get in a body blow. He pretended to strike at the stranger's head. The latter raised his staff swiftly to parry, and Robin, changing his hold in the direction of his blow with wonderful speed and dexterity, caught his opponent a tremendous thwack across the ribs. The giant gave a growl of anger and replied with such a terrific slashing cut that no man could have stood before it. But Robin dodged it nimbly and replied with a smart rap across the shoulder. But even as this fell, the stranger whirled his staff in his hands and launched a shrewd stroke at Robin's head. Nothing but Robin's quickness saved him from being knocked headlong into the stream, and as it was, he did not altogether escape. The big man's staff glanced across his head, cut his crown, and caused the blood to stream down the side of his face. This put Robin in such a rage that he dealt a whole shower of blows at his opponent with such swiftness that the tall man was kept entirely on the defensive. He was forced to parry, all the time. Time and again, Robin's quick staff got home on the big man's body, but the tall fellow never gave way an inch, but fought stoutly on. Suddenly, the giant repaid Robin Hood's many thwacks once and for all. Gathering all his tremendous strength, he brought down his great staff with all the power of his long arms and mighty body. Robin parried, but though his stick was held correctly, he might as well have tried to parry a thunderbolt. Down came the crashing blow. It broke Robin Hood's staff in two. It fell with but little diminished force on Robin's body and hurled him flying into the brook. Beneath the bridge was a deep pool, and in went Robin Hood head over ears. In a moment he came up gasping for breath. "Ha, ha, Master Archer," laughed the stranger merrily. "Where art thou now?" "By my faith," replied Robin Hood, spluttering and blowing, for he had swallowed a good deal of cold water, "methinks I am in the brook fairly enough, and thou hast won the bout. But I'll freely say thou hast won fairly." Then Robin Hood waded to the side and climbed onto the bank, pulling himself up by the aid of a whitethorn bush which grew at the waterside. As soon as he was on the bank, Robin set his horn to his mouth and blew the notes which formed his own bugle call. Scarce had the valley ceased ringing with the echo of the horn than his stout bowmen came in sight, Much and Wat and Will running ahead of the rest in their eagerness to gain the sight of their leader. "Why, master," cried Will Stutely as they ran up to the place, "what is the meaning of this? You are wet to the skin and the water is dripping from you. Have you been in the brook?" "Aye, that I have, Will," replied Robin Hood, "and there stands the man who put me there," and he pointed to the gigantic stranger. "Then in he goes too," cried Will, and Much and Wat shouted, "Aye, aye, 'twere foul shame to let him go scot-free after treating our leader so. In with him, lads!" The stranger prepared to resist, but even his great strength would not have availed him against the crowd of angry yeomen had not Robin Hood called upon them to desist. "Hold your hands, my lads," said Robin. "Ye shall do no wrong to this bold hart. It was a fair fight, and he won, and I owe him no grudge for it. Rather would I be friends with so stout a striker. Come," and now Robin turned to the stranger, "join us and be one of our band." "First," said the stranger, "who are ye?" "I have sworn to enlist under one man, and one man only, and in search of him have I come." "I am Robin Hood," said the leader. "Robin Hood!" cried the other. "Oh, happy day! It is he for whom I search, and to Sherwood Forest am I making my way to enter his goodly company, if I may." "Thou mayest, in very truth," cried Robin, "and gladly will I receive thee." "Methinks such a recruit is not picked up every day. And what shall we call thee?" "My name is John Little," replied the stranger. "I'll serve thee well and faithfully, and here's my hand on it." When Will Stutely heard the stranger's name, he began to laugh. "John Little!" he cried. "By my faith, that name ought to be changed, and as he is a newcomer to our band, let him be christened anew, and I will name him." "And what wilt thou call him then?" cried Much. Why, seeing that the infant is so puny, his name shall no longer be John Little, but he shall be called Little John." The outlaws laughed at the idea of calling this giant Little John, but the jest pleased them, and the name was given to the new recruit. "Now for a jolly feast to finish off the christening," said Will Stutely. "It is not every day we get such a stout companion in our band, and we must have a revel in honor of it." So they went back to the forest, and soon 2 fat does had fallen to their keen shafts and were being carried to their hiding place, the great cave in the rock which was their secure retreat. Here they built a great fire, roasted their venison, and feasted on the rich meat, washing it down with mighty draughts of nut-brown ale. And when the feast was over, they sang to the music of the harp, and danced and enjoyed the frolic to their heart's content. And high above them all rose the head of Little John, he who was to prove so staunch of soul and stout of hand, whose name was to fill the ballads with a renown second only to his great leader, Robin Hood. We'll stop there today and start tomorrow with Chapter 3. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.